Hello, I'm Michael Kurland, CEO and co-founder of Branded Group, an award-winning facility maintenance and construction management company that services multi-site commercial properties such as retail, restaurants, healthcare facilities, and educational institutions. Welcome to the Be Better podcast. Each week, I interview thought leaders from a variety of industries who will share their stories and the lessons they learn as they strive to be better for their clients, partners, employees, and their community. Are you ready to be better? Okay, welcome to another episode of the Be Better podcast. We're very excited today. This is our first multiple guest podcast. We have Allison Holzer and Sandy Spataro, two of the three co-CEOs of InspireCorps. InspireCorps is an inspiration strategy firm who partners with corporations, healthcare systems, and higher education institutions to use inspiration to drive innovation and growth. Allison and Sandy, thank you so much for being on the show. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and anything else you'd like to add about your company?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. It's really great to be here. We are super passionate about inspiration. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the show. And we've done some original research on how inspiration can come to life to drive better performance and results for organizations. That's what we're really all about. I'll just add for me personally, before co-founding InspireCorps with Sandy, and also we have a third co-founder and co-CEO who is not here, and her name's Jen Grace Barron. We came together to found the company back in 2013. And prior to that, my work was in emotional intelligence at the Yale Center for EI. So really learning about how emotions drive performance and results.
Great.
I'm also really happy to be with you. Anything called Be Better is a good thing to be a part of. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I come from a combination of Silicon Valley and academic background. So, and one really kind of fed the other. I had to work for a while before I had anything to say, and then got into academia to try to say it. But culture is something that I love to do research on and talk about. So I'm excited for our conversation today.
Well, I'm actually very excited as well. I mean, I like to consider myself sort of a culture guru, and to have the experts on culture, you guys can maybe give me a grade or rate Branded Group after we're all said and done. We don't want to do that on the air if it's not a good grade, but we'll go from there. So let's jump right in. And I want to ask you ladies, how do you define company culture? How is culture impacted, by a remote and distributed workforce? Let's talk about those two things real quick.
Yeah, I'll start. So culture is really how you live your values. It's bringing to life, a lot of us have on a business card 5 values set out there. And sometimes those are the real ones, and sometimes those are just the ones we say. But it's how those come to life in the company in really kind of the informal, taken for granted way to approach things. The stuff you just know how to do because that's how we do it here. It reflects shared values again. So what we really all together hold as important. And so, members of the company knowing what the values are, knowing what brings the culture together, and then caring about them makes a difference in how sort of strong the culture is and what influence it has on how people spend their days and behave. Leaders do a lot to drive culture by what they do formally in things like reward systems and performance management and ceremonies and rituals that different companies have. Those are really nice ways to see what the company values and how they like to treat each other. But it also shows up in how leaders themselves behave. If I say that I value family time and life balance, I better be leaving at 3 p.m. when my kid has a play at his school that day and demonstrating that for the company. So leaders have a strong effect on how the culture comes to life and how influential it is over people's behavior.
Right. It can't just be words on the wall. It's got to be.
It can't just be words on the wall. Absolutely.
Lived and breathed by everyone in your company.
Yeah, and something that I think of often with culture is that it will happen no matter what in the company. And so there is such an opportunity for leaders to be able to craft and create the culture with everyone, together. And it's better that way, because that's when you can create a culture that aligns to your values instead of just waiting and seeing what kind of culture evolves, but it will happen no matter what.
Absolutely. And I think from our point of view, we had a firm come in, and they are our PR firm, but they also work on putting culture together. And they set, well, at least values, and they sat down with all of our team members, and we had probably about 50 at the time. And we did this whole exercise to really define what Branded Group's values were. And that kind of bubbled up into growing into the culture. And that was about 4 years ago. And we still live by those. Those are the words on the wall today, but we live by those words. So to your guys' point. So how is culture, I brought it up before, but how is culture impacted by the remote and distributed workforce? What are you guys seeing out there in these crazy times?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the hard things is that, culture, it's harder to reinforce right now because of so many being remote and distributed. Not everyone is in that situation, but even in situations where there are folks on the ground, there's more of a mix, where they only allow a certain number of people who are on the ground. And so this distributed and hybrid format makes it harder to be able to reinforce culture in some of the ways that you might traditionally do it, even in terms of, environment matters. We've talked to several clients who, their building is important that they go into. I talked to someone just yesterday who said they went into their building for the first time in months, and they were not prepared for how emotional that experience was to be in the building, because what came back to them in that moment when they walked through the door was why their work mattered. It was that reinforcement of the values and the culture that they felt in the environment. And so we don't have that. But the good news is that we can begin to get creative about creating remote culture and environment in new and different ways. And some of that is taking the ways that you reinforce culture if you were in person and translating that to virtual. And then some of it's kind of innovating new ways to reinforce and bring culture to life, which we've also been hearing some interesting ways that people are doing that.
I think you bring up some good points. It's kind of a blank canvas right now, right? Because we've gone from traditional office to this remote workforce. And, I've run out of ways, the Zoom happy hours and the Zoom trivia nights, right? Like that. And that's more bringing people together, but it is part of the culture. But I'm looking for new ways to engage our employees for culture. So if you guys have any tips on that, I think myself specifically and the audience would love to hear how can we get the culture moving from this remote point of view.
Yeah, I think it goes back to Allison's earlier point about a culture is going to happen, and it's going to happen in your distributed team or department just as well as in an in-person one. So you really do want to actively shape it. And it's about, there's the social aspect to it and the feel-good part of it, but it's also go back to the substance of the values that your company has. Like you talked about emerging organically from team discussion. So, for example, at InspireCorps, one of our top values is relationships first. That really matters to us. And that was easy to model and live when we were in a co-working space together and saw each other very frequently. And, water cooler conversations happen quite naturally. Well, we've had to be a little more systematic about how we do that. So every, our Monday morning 8 a.m. huddle starts with a good 20, 25 minutes of just checking in. How is everybody? How are we doing? Connecting on, whatever photos we may have shared with each other over the weekend through text, group texts and that kind of thing. And really going back to the values and saying, what does this look like in a distributed environment? And then how do we bring it to life so that there's that really tight connection there? What do you value and how do you live it?
I think that's great advice. And I actually just stole a little piece myself, because our Monday morning huddle usually starts off with, we did 400 calls and we did $100,000 last week. And, no one even takes a deep breath to talk about how their weekend was or how their kids are or whatever. And and I usually go last because I'm the CEO, so I'll let everyone else talk. But I think I'm going to go first this week, and I'm going to lead off with how's everyone feeling? How's the weekend, especially after all the things we're going through last night and today.
And then the second thing we do is wins in progress, just like you're saying. So what's going that we can really celebrate and feel good about and reinforce.
I love it. So let's get into the Inspire in your name, InspireCorps. How do you know if the culture is inspiring or not? Because that's really what you guys are the experts at, right? So let's talk about that.
You want me to go? Sure. Let me start by talking about how we think about inspiration and what really came up from our original research on it. We define inspiration as the intersection of possibility, so seeing more options, broadening your view of what could be possible, and then the intersection of that with a greater sense of invincibility, more confidence and more courage. So I see more options available to me and I feel courageous and confident to go after them. That's inspiration. And so you're looking for evidence of that in your culture, ways to bring that to life in your culture. So, people being more resilient when they're faced with setbacks, they're able to see more possibilities for coming back. They feel more confident in it. Just being more generative and creative in a problem-solving situation, more alternatives come out. A sense of agency, of confidence, especially during a difficult time like this one, or where there's a lot of change or uncertainty. People feeling like, yeah, this is rough, but we got it. We're doing it. We're taking it day by day. We're getting there ourselves. So it's looking for and instilling a greater sense of possibility and invincibility in what's happening. In our book that we recently published, Dare to Inspire, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. That happened fast. We actually identify engines of inspiration, what we call these reliable pathways or ways to spark inspiration. And those can be used to infuse a culture as well. Things that you, again, connecting to your values and purpose. But we also have a set of engines that are about relationships and a set of engines that are about circumstances, like Allison was referring to the environment you're in and what about that can bring your culture to life more. So it's these different ways of finding greater possibility and invincibility. And then it leads to some pretty great outcomes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, I think the other thing to keep in mind with, as Sandy was saying, possibility, invincibility in the culture, really think about if you're looking or asking yourself the question, is our culture inspiring or not? Really the opposite of that is burnout. Now, when you're feeling low energy, when you're feeling like you don't have any possibilities in front of you, when you don't feel energized to take action or move forward. Now, those are kind of at polar opposites, and we often will feel, somewhere in between, and we're kind of always navigating that process. But when you start to notice burnout in the culture, that's a sign, or individually for yourself, but it's a sign that more inspiration would be beneficial and help people essentially perform and collaborate better. And in our book, we talk about, well, for the sake of what, inspiration is not just because it feels good, which it does. Generally we feel better when we're inspired. But it's not just that kind of feel-good emotion. It actually drives better business results. And so when we look to measure and track on in a culture, is it inspiring? We're looking for these outcomes of inspiration, which we found are things like, when people are inspired, they're more strategic and innovative in their thinking. They are more agile and resilient in responding to change, which is really important right now. They actually have closer connections and relationships. So in culture, this can look like better collaboration, more information sharing, more trust across groups. And they just overall have better performance results, because when you're inspired, you're thinking outside of the box, you're more energized to take action, and that generally leads to better results in whatever you're working on in your work. So those are really important business outcomes that it leads to.
Absolutely. You guys are inspiring me right now to read your book, which I plan on doing anyway, but you touched on a few points that are hitting home for us. We have burnout because when we first had the pandemic hit, we furloughed, 75% of our workforce out of pure necessity. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And we kept a skeleton crew, which was the 25%, and they've been working since March. And as we've been bringing people back, we've been doing it very slowly and we're almost back to our full staffing right now. But the people that have been working since March are burnt out and they need some inspiration. And, back to what I was saying before about, what we're doing in terms of remote culture, that stuff is kind of not working right now. Like, sure, I don't want to do another Zoom happy hour after I just worked a 10-hour day, after I just worked 2 weeks straight and couldn't take time off because I had to stay on top of my work because we didn't have enough people, kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that's available on audiobooks because I'm going to probably download it very shortly. Great. So you guys just talked about the inspiration inside of a company. Do you have any specific companies that there's an example of where this culture and this inspiration is currently that can be reference points?
Yeah, sure. First, I'll mention I used to be on the board of Conscious Capitalism Connecticut, and Conscious Capitalism is actually a nationwide, actually global now movement. And we even talk about it in our book, but it's really about companies that not only care about the bottom line, but they also value things like having a higher purpose and how they are taking care of and engaging their employees and stakeholders. And we do find that companies that are kind of purpose-driven in this way and really caring about their employees and culture typically are good examples of inspiring and effective company cultures. So I think you could look there. That would be a place you can see many different examples of companies that are inspiring in their culture or working on becoming inspiring in their culture. It is a process. It's not like a you are or you aren't. It's more dynamic than that. I'll also share that there's a company that we write about in the book and that we know really well, and they're called Peach. They are a women's athleisure company, and they do some really innovative and dynamic things. And what we love about their story is that their CEO basically decided at the very beginning, like day one of their company, we want inspiration, we want culture to really matter, and that the people are what drives success. And so we're going to bake inspiration and positive psychology into everything that we do as much as possible. So they've baked, they infuse strengths into all of their language and culture, how they run meetings. They have people taking the strengths assessment. They infuse positive psychology and inspiration into their performance management system. So they're really having conversations with people about what matters to them and how they can bring that into their work. They do some of the team practices that we talked about, like opening up team meetings with connection and with wins. Those are just some simple examples. And one of my favorite is when the CFO shared that he actually measures number of laughs in the company and reports out on that when they report on their financials, which I just think is a great example of how much they care about their culture.
That's great. That's I mean, I don't know how you measure laughs, but I'm sure this guy figured it out, right? So I too am a subscriber of Conscious Capitalism. It's actually kind of how we came to the Be Better brand of culture at Branded Group. I was feeling kind of empty, and I was talking with my PR person, and she actually recommended it. Because I think that's how you guys know each other, right, Allison?
Yeah.
Conscious Capitalism. So I read the book, and it really inspired. I was at a point where I was turning a little bit of a profit. It was like early on, I think after year one, and I was trying to find my way as an entrepreneur. And we made some money, but I was kind of feeling empty inside. And I read Conscious Capitalism, and that's how we started. We had a program called the 1-for-1 program, where we donated a minute of community service through our employees to Habitat for Humanity of Orange County. And we've outgrown that program. That was for every service call that we completed. And we've outgrown that program now because we've got so many calls that we would have to hire someone full-time just to do community service work. But we do pledge about 2,500 hours a year of community service across our 3 partners in Orange County and New York. So you just hit a good note for me. I'm glad that we brought up conscious capitalism. I think it's very important.
You know, the old business thinking of if I can either put money into my people or into my business is just false. And we're finding that leaders are so refreshed to learn that the way to do better in my business is by investing in my people, you know, is to really treat people well to drive the business forward. And it's a great model.
It is one of our values. It's, you know, be better to our people. And we have a retention rate of 96%, used to be 98. But we're down to 96 now. We had a couple people leave to go back to school or things of that nature. This is pre-pandemic, not counting the furloughed people. But and we knew that from what we did as a company, which is facilities management, if we took care of our employees, they would take care of our clients, which would give us more sales, right? So it's like a chicken and the egg kind of thing. So we started putting more money into our employees, and that's why our culture is so very important to us. So being that you guys are the gurus on culture and inspiration, what stands out the most about your culture for your employees and clients? And if you could change anything about that culture, what would you change?
Yeah, I think for our culture, I'll go back to the value we already mentioned, which is relationships first, because that's just so core to who we are as a team internally. That's very important to us, but it's also our leading edge with our clients. And, you know, sometimes we'll meet a client who just wants to buy a training program, and we're interested in an actual relationship that's going to have impact and last. And so words like partnership and, you know, sticky learning and things like that are pretty important to us in terms of integrity in the relationships that we have with our clients. So I think it's one of the things that our clients experience in us and of our culture, first and foremost. What to change in our culture is a tricky one. We're a high love team of women. It's a women-owned business, certified, and one of the things, though, that I think we have to all watch each other for in protecting the relationships is we're all high achievers and hard workers. And sometimes there's just too much of a work ethic and we can burn ourselves out. So as leaders in our organization, we try to really reward people with things like time off and a trip to the spa and a holiday with things, and praise people when they take their time off and really look for balance in their lives. But when you have such strong commitment from your team, you really got to kind of help them keep boundaries to protect and be able to sustain their high level of charge.
I totally agree. I think a lot of burnout is because what else is there to do, right? And these people are just throwing themselves into their work, specifically at Branded Group, because there's nothing else to do and they just want to excel and succeed. And so I totally agree with you. I have been forcing my leaders to take their time off. And I'm like, I don't even care if you just sit home and watch movies and eat popcorn all day. That's fine. There's nowhere to go anywhere, but you just need a mental break. Like, this stuff is, you know, what we do is facilities management. It's not, you know, it is break fix every day. So there are days where there are emergencies, but it doesn't mean you can't take a day or two off just to like take that break. So I appreciate that. And relationships, like you said, it's so key. Like the one word you said that struck with me is partnership. And I feel like it's a lost word in at least in the world prior to the pandemic. We always were I always tell my clients when I'm out trying to close a deal that I want to start a partnership with you. I want to get to know your spouse, your dog's name, your kids' names, like what drives you, what you're interested in. I'm not trying to just sit here and sell you. Yes, I want to sell you something, of course, but that kind of stuff is old school mentality where you're just trying to close a deal and then pass it along to the ops team and never talk to them again. That's not how you grow a business. That's not how you grow a partnership. And so
No.
I want them to know I'm the guy they can call when they have the big issue. So
That's right.
I think that touches on some really great things. So thank you for that information. So next question, if leaders want to make their cultures more inspiring, what steps can they take or advice would you give them in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, great question. So first, I would say that this is something we talk about in our book, how a leader's first job is to inspire yourself, that your own energy and inspiration levels are modeled and cascaded to all those around you. So culture starts with you, and that's certainly a good short-term place to start. And our book, Dare to Inspire, the first basically 3/4 of the book is all about that. How do you manage your own levels of inspiration in your work? But then what we get into, and we actually have some great exercises in chapter 12 of the book on inspiring organizations and culture, where you can get into and really think through how this is looking in your culture and what are some ideas and places that you can look. One of the first things that we talk about in that chapter is purpose, because it is one of the most high octane kind of engines of inspiration. And it's one of the places that you really can go back to time and time again. Even if you have a purpose, the truth is it evolves over time. And especially during a pandemic when there's so much change, it needs to be dynamic and alive, and not just at the company level, but for each individual to feel connected to it. So that's certainly a good place to start. And, I think you can go through the exercises and think about other engines of inspiration that resonate in your culture, places that you can systematize them and reward them in different ways. So that's where I would recommend to look longer term and shorter term. Really start with yourself first.
Don't ask anyone to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself, right? That's one thing that's one rule that I've tried to live by, roll up my sleeves and show them I'm willing to do anything I'm asking them to do. And it usually will help them. So I guess I have to inspire myself is where I'm going with that. So
we're finding during this time, excuse me, Michael, that the burnout is one of the antidotes to burnout, or one of the pathways out of burnout really starts with going back to purpose and the desired impact, really the why behind the work you're doing. So as Allison said, at the company level, yes, but also for each individual, and connecting to that is really a kind of a lifeline out of the empty burnout feelings. And so those questions of, what contribution do I want to make? What kind of impact do I want to have? What strengths do I bring to my work that I can leverage to do that? End up being creating new vision for people, new possibilities, new ways of seeing things through. So it's particularly useful at a time like this.
Well, that's very encouraging that there is a lifeline out of burnout, right? Because you don't want to think you've totally lost that person going forward. So for our audience, how can they best track and monitor their successes for the short and the long term for more inspiration?
Good question. Go ahead, Sandy.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So we have, certainly if folks are interested in individually monitoring and tracking, we actually have a short survey / quiz that they can take. You can find on our website. If you go to InspireCorps.com and you go to the section where you'll see, it should be pretty clear where to find it. And so it's a nice place where you can go and take a quick assessment of your own inspiration levels. We also in our book have a couple different indexes there. So we have an individual, and then we also have a way that you can kind of think about and track on that for your team actually, and also for company culture. So those are some ways that you can begin.
It really starts with honing a practice of self-awareness. and really kind of learning how to gauge it internally, and being just like you want to be able to recognize and identify your own emotions. Inspiration is part of that. And so being able to have a sense of it and know when it's waning or when you want to fire things up. And then it becomes a practice. It becomes a muscle that you work, like one at the gym, and it gets easier the more you use it, and stronger.
I totally agree. I feel like there was a part of my life where I didn't have as high of self-awareness as I would probably have liked. That was also the time of my life where I went through a lot of struggles, and I was not an entrepreneur. But as I came into my own to become the entrepreneur I am today, my self-awareness probably a year before skyrocketed, and I started really understanding what was I putting out there, and were my vibes negative? Were they positive? Were people picking up on those negativity or positive, those vibes that I was sending? And I had to start owning some stuff, and it's tough, because a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for their actions when they're negative, and they may want to, play the victim or victor. So we could probably dive into a whole nother podcast about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I so agree with the self-awareness being something that's so key, especially for people that are trying to lead and inspire. If you don't have self-awareness, how can you put anyone in any direction of any positivity, right? So, well, ladies, this has been a great chat. There's so much more I want to dive into. I especially emotional intelligence. That's something that I think CEOs specifically don't even have on their radar when they should, or at least not enough CEOs have it on their radar. But it's something that I try to lead with on a daily basis. And we've talked about it on the ancillary parts of our conversation. But I'd love to have you guys back and maybe deep dive into some stuff like that. But
Sure.
for now, if anyone wants to get a hold of you guys, how can they reach you? I'll let Allison, why don't you go first, and then Sandy.
Sure. So if you're interested in learning more about our firm, you can visit our website. It's InspireCorps, that's spelled CORPS, like Army Corps, .com. And you can also find us on all social media channels: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And our handle there is InspireCorps Co. So CORPS.CO at the end. And you can find us there as well. But if you'd like to reach out personally, my email is Allison, ALLISON, @InspireCorps.com.
And I'm Sandy at InspireCorps.com. Please reach out. We'd love that.
Great. This has been great, ladies. And to the audience, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you guys got as much out of this conversation as I did. Till next time.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope that today's episode inspired you to become a purpose-driven leader in your career or your community. There's no doubt that when we lead with purpose, we can change lives. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd be grateful if you would take a moment to rate us on your preferred listening platform. To learn more about Branded Group's Be Better experience and how we provide industry-leading, on-demand facility maintenance, construction management, and special project implementation, visit us at www.branded-group.com. Be sure to follow us on social media, and you can also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Until next time, be better.